Hi, I am Seamless. Today is Thursday, and I am doing part 2 of the making of Fireflies. This is going to be the sound design portion where I talk about how I made all the stuff, and this is going to be fun, as I mentioned in the last video, and I'm going to mention again because now it's this video, weirdos, is that a lot of these sounds, specifically these audio bits that are the main basses in the thing in the song, I actually did not make in this song, and I don't even know where and what song I actually did make them in. So it's going to be fun to try and sort of describe how they were made without knowing specifically. I know enough of the generalities that I should be able to point you in the right direction to sort of creating the sounds yourself if you would like to. A few of them I think I even made for how to bass, and so I would know. I'll tell you which one I think it was, or at least what might have been in the title. So if you want to go on an expedition to find out, you can. So let's start from the top. The very first thing we hear in this song is a piano. My speakers are kind of loud. There we go. Now, this is East-West Quantum Leap pianos. East-West Quantum Leap is the name of the group of sounds, I guess, that they make. The company that makes this is called Sounds Online. If you just Google East-West Quantum Leap, you'll probably find this. This is East-West pianos. This is the Bossendorfer. I don't think I'm doing a whole lot to this. I have... it's pretty much the default settings, with a little bit of reverb. Yeah, okay. It's a whole bunch of EQ. Normally when I'm doing piano, I have an Edison on here, and it's not doing anything. Edison, if you see Edisons on channels, it's because it's recording something and then I wanted to use for things. I probably recorded that because I wanted to try screwing around with it in Break Tweaker. But if you see Edisons, it's because for recording, it's not really doing much else. This is Valhalla Room. This is a great reverb. It's very easy to use. It's one of those. This is a plugin that I like because it's very easy to use easily, but it's also very deep. There's a lot of controls on like the early and late reflections that you can control and change very lots of things. But if you don't want to mess with any of this, you can just mess with these guys. And this is usually enough to get you your basic, really nice sounding reverb, and I like it a lot. The EQ curving decisions that I made on this were mostly mix based, so I guess I'll talk about that when we get to the mixing and mastering part. The piano is not really doing a huge amount of whatever's happening, but the thing about pianos and competent piano libraries is that the tone and the feel and even the mix of a piano is mostly determined by the velocity level of a note. You might notice there's a bit of a change going on in the various notes here. The lower notes are generally a bit higher than the higher notes, and that's because higher notes, they sound way brighter when you hit them way harder, which you might be thinking, well, but most of the time a person might be tempted to just have whatever they're doing and just put full on all the velocity all at once. And if you want to have more control over the sound, velocity is where it's at. So velocity is what I was using because I wanted the higher notes, but I didn't want the higher notes high frequencies, so I didn't make them that hard. I wanted the lower notes higher frequencies, so they mesh and they blend together. And those were all decisions that were controlled by the amount of velocity that you were using in the piano. Not all libraries are super great at producing this nature of pianos. In fact, a little bit of a history lesson. The piano was called a piano because its full name is pianoforte, which is to say that you can play soft and you can play loud, and it actually has that dynamic range in there. And this, I mean, the world in which a piano, the first piano became a thing was one where the primary keyboard instruments were harpsichords, which only had one level of playing, because instead of having hammers that the notes, the keys triggered, it had plucks, and it would pluck a string, and it would always be the same level and did not have any kind of dynamic range involved that the player could control. So that's why the pianoforte was kind of a big deal. Shortened to the piano eventually, that kind of thing. Next up, we've got all of these dudes. So these guys I made using a secondary brake tweaker. The primary brake tweaker is where I'm doing the drums, and then the secondary brake tweaker is where I'm running samples and stuff. So this guy even might be one of them. Nice, it totally is. Okay, so this I have the sample loaded. Somebody asked in the last video if you could load your own samples, and the answer is yes, you can. This is the sample window, which you get here by clicking on this thing. This is where you can go to either. There's a whole bunch of these guys. If I get out of here, we have I just have a big note, and it plays the note. If you click on the note, you get these options. And this is the stutter that I created for that note. And you saw in here that it was doing the ping pong thing. So that was like, because obviously it's not a very long sample. That was a big part of that. There's a bunch of other ones. I think this is another. Not doing much. There's a piano that I was trying to mess with. I was trying to be clever with that. Didn't really work out very well. A lot of the ones that I ended up using for this one, I switched out the samples on top of that. So like this guy, looks like it's probably this one. It's not, but you can see how it's kind of related. Same as that guy. It's around here somewhere, but it's that's basically how I made all of these guys. There it is. Now, I wasn't really going after a particular... I actually really had no idea what I was doing when I was doing that, because this entire style of like effects and Foley doings is new to me still. I haven't done that since, and I did it for kind of for the R is silent, the actual track, the R is silent. I did a little bit of that too, but for the most part, it wasn't nearly as deep as what was going on in this track. So I really just made a whole bunch of crap and stuck them in there and just kind of laid them around and like let them work if they did or not. And most of the time they did, because I don't even know why, honestly. It just kind of, I mean, the way that if I use it, like, you know, mostly as filler kind of things, it kind of works out. So that kind of stuff is cool. So now there's this thing. So what we're hearing right now is the unmolested version of it, because what we're hearing mostly in the song is a version of this that has a wave shaper applied to it and getting on kind of huge. But right now it's mixed all the way off, so we're not really hearing any of that. We got some reverb, we got gross beat, which is happening at the very end of the song. I covered that at the very end of the last video. And some filters that happen all throughout. I believe this is also happening there near the end of the song. I forget why this is here. There was probably a frequency that was giving me issues in the mix. So the way that you make these kind of like pongy, glassy sounding things in synths is that you stick to not a huge amount of harmonic content. So like we're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 harmonics, not a huge amount of harmonics. And the way that I don't think I'm using a pluck. I don't think I'm using any kind of anything. Nope. The plucking nature of it is actually just the fact that I'm using short notes. I have a lot of unison going on. I don't think I'm doing anything clever with unison. Nope. Everything is pretty much as it says on its face. I have the harmonic detune spread like this, which puts it into the harmonic position of a square wave, which is why we're getting that rounder sound. Square waves have more to do with sine waves than saws do in terms of the relationship. You can saturate a sine wave and you'll get a square wave. And, I mean, the less amount of harmonic content you're using, the more like the fundamental it'll sound like. And the way that I'm accomplishing this is through the filter. I have the filter on and I have keyboard tracking on, which means that, see, this filter profile where it's cutting off right here is following all the notes so that it has the exact same harmonic content on all the notes. There are other ways to do that, however, but it's just on its face, literally on the face, the easiest way to do it, just in my own particular opinion. I'm also doing a little bit of filtering with the actual filter, and and the reverb is being done by Valerium, which again, it was mostly just doing changes on the big knobs. Nope. The way this sound works is that we have this filter, and it starts out pretty low, and then the waveform comes in. And also the grow speed's on, which is just one of the complex defaults. I didn't really do much with it. And it comes on. Do I ever turn it off? Yeah, okay, it turns off over here too. It kind of fade out with it. So the filter comes all the way up here. And then now I can see why I have this cut here, because the higher frequencies will be quite killer with what the wave shaper is doing. Because we're distorting a high frequency sound. And we're also doing it with this particular shape, which is kind of the wave shaper's way of doing bit crushing. It's not identical to bit crushing, but it is related to bit crushing. It's a bit of a different flavor of crushing. And when you distort higher frequency, when you distort anything, what you're doing is you're adding high frequency sounds. So if you're distorting a high frequency sound, you're adding ridiculously high frequencies. So some control was required for that. Also, we're hearing the effects because the effects most of the time are just in the master. I don't really remember why I tolerated that, but I did, and whatever, they worked. That's the power of compression for you. So the next thing that happens up here is this guy. This is the bass. So this is a preset that should be familiar to lots of long-time followers of the SeamlessR channel. This is Phase Warp 19. Except it's not really Phase Warp 19. Phase Warp 19 has a phaser. And like... you can kind of see that it sounds a little related, but I just wanted a straight kind of resync sounding thing, so I just did that. Had a lot of harmonic unison going on. Which I'm pretty sure is what's causing the, yeah. I have this shape going on the harmonic unison pitch window, found here. I have the phaser mask, which was only usable when the phaser was actually on. The phaser's not on, so it's not doing anything. The local EQ is sort of where we're getting the tone that we're getting, because right now we're in square mode, but then we're really, you can even see what's going on here in the harmonic stack here. The fundamental, the first octave, and the second octave. So you have the fundamental, the first octave, which there's nothing there for it to compare to, and then this harmonic got brought down in the middle, the second octave, and then this got brought down again, and then it got brought back up for the higher amounts. Like this is basically this weird harmonic notching I'm doing is what's causing the kind of hollow tone that we're feeling, on top of the already hollow sounding nature of a solid wave, square wave. Using distortion inside there, I don't believe I'm doing much up here. I have another wave shaper which is doing vague saturation. I've also got a gigantic notch. So that's a big part of the sound right there, is that happening. I have this business on top of this. This is essentially the post wave shaper EQ, and here's me trying to do a band pass. That didn't work out, so I just wasn't using it. This guy though. So it goes this EQ, this wave shaper, this EQ. You might be wondering why you do both. Well, EQ into distortion has a really big impact on how the distortion handles the sound. In fact, if you've never tried this before, I recommend that you find whatever it is that you like using your distortion to do, and then messing around with an EQ before the distortion. Pushing up things, taking down things, and look how it behaves, because it might be more effective, because there's a lot of things that distortion does that people want to like attenuate with post EQs, things like the mid-range muddiness, but there's still other parts of that they want to actually keep. I remember what I said about distortion adding higher harmonics onto things. Well, if you have yawning so hard, if you have a whole bunch of lower frequencies, and then you're distorting it, you're gonna get a whole bunch of higher frequencies, but they're still dependent on each individual one of those frequencies that were originally in the thing. So if you get rid of particular frequencies before the distortion, that actually removes a whole like layer of frequencies from and activity on top of the stuff. It might actually reveal behavior in that same range that you didn't like, that you actually did like. So I recommend messing with that. Don't believe there's anything else important inside the creation of this. Detune, harmonic detune 2, pitch all the way down, because I made this way back when I was using my actual typing keyboard to be my primary previewing, as opposed to my actual keyboard that I have on my desk now, which is a KeyStation 49 ES from M Audio. People are always asking. Yeah. So that was that sound, and then we're getting to the actual. This up here is the drums. What are you? Oh, it's more bass. So this is kind of related. This is just that. And then down here was the ARP. So this guy was fading in on top of stuff. By default, it's muted. What channel are you on? Fairly complicated sound. So I have in the mixing anyway, I have the main channel, and it's going into a delay, and then it's going into reverb and gross beat. I really don't remember why I did that, but also the gross beat doesn't appear to be doing anything. I think I was gonna automate this. I don't know if I did ever. And then of course reverb. So I had delay and reverb separately, and then they're both going into the sidechain channel where they're going out. Except for that, the ARP is actually going out to the master as well, which is the main thing, which is fascinating. So I wanted just to sidechain the reverb and delay, and because I'm manually automating this thing being on in the song. So that kind of explains that. This ARP is present during like just about everything. So that here's the ARP automation here. It's also present during the drop. Ah, it's up here. What the hell was this? 1, 2, 33. Something else entirely. I suppose we'll find out later. But yeah, it's up here too. And I guess this is the gross beat for that? Nope. Something else entirely. Yeah, so that's that ARP. Let's go look at how it was made. So ARPs, I tend to do. This is a really fast one. As far as our actual ARP settings, I do this in the channel settings window. You go to the function tab, and you have the ARP settings in here. So I have range 3, which would say that it's going up 3 octaves. It's auto-sustained, so that means it's going to play each individual note of whatever chord I'm holding. Which can actually make the ARP sort of longer, because if I'm doing just one note, it takes a while, but if I hold like a lot of notes, it'll play through all the notes. The time is super duper short. I don't know if I automate that ever, but you can automate the time like while you're doing it, which is a trick that I learned from Savant. I learned it from BT, who learned it from Savant. So it was originating from Savant in terms of how I learned it. Actual sound, it's plucked. Let's actually turn the ARP off for a second so that we can look at how this sounds by itself. So, detune 2, the square wave type. Pluck, I don't think I changed the pluck at all. Nope, I don't change anything. And then a whole bunch of unison, but like tiny amount of actual pitch, but a huge amount of like reverb and a huge amount of phase. But also the randomness phase randomness is huge. This is like maximum phase, and the unison is already phase randomness. So the phase random is pretty huge. And the point of doing that is that it creates it aids in the panning as well, because it means that all of the voices all have different kinds of phasing happening, and it makes the spread nice and even. Because we've got a lot of reverb, we've got a lot of like delay and all that, so it's not like it matters. And I'm doing almost nothing else for these kinds of ARPs, and especially something that I'm playing so fast. I really don't want to do a lot, because the more complicated the sound gets, the denser it'll feel, which might be a thing you might want. But for this, I kind of want to be able to hear like individual notes and for it to be a thing. Oh, it's just a chord. That sound we're hearing, that was just that tail, was the that lead that we talked about in the very beginning that had all the distortion on it now. That's why I distorted it, to cause that kind of big ass sort of reverb to delay, but with distortion, because we are distorting the reverb. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, so that was the ARP. And then the piano, and this is a sub drop, I think. It's just a bass that we talked about earlier. That's cool. So this is also the first time we see this stuff. There's also these guys, which are just hits and impacts and stuff like that. Straight out of the Leviathan sound pack. So this guy. Now, throughout the rest of the song, the primary automation that's on the sample is a bandpass filter, which is what this guy's doing. And then, but up here, I'm automating a whole bunch of other shit. And that's because I think do I do this on the main stuff too? Yeah. So the main automation is the bandpass, but the secondary automation is the reverb. That kind of like bigness that you hear kind of filter in every once in a while is a Valhalla room that I'm turning the mix level up and down on, which is what this guy is. And in this particular instance, as you can tell from this automation clip that turns it on and off, I also have a low pass filter. Which wasn't a huge change because it was already kind of a low sounding thing because I kept the bandpass kind of low, but I was using this to make it kind of feel a little bit more mysterious because this is the first time we actually heard the sound itself. What else am I doing this sound? So the original sound comes in here. This is the bandpass, and then it's a chorus. Using a chorus, wow, and the cutoff's all the way up top, so it's barely doing much that's noticeable, but it's there. It's probably to create sort of stereo spreading, honestly. And here's the Valhalla room. You might have thought I was automating this thing, but no, I'm automating the wet dry knob inside FL itself, and all of that is being compressed into a Maximus. Not really doing a huge amount of impressive stuff. It's mostly just a giant like balancing and limiting, plus also stereo spreading and stereo not spreading for the low frequencies. Because remember, I don't have a separate sub in this track. So that means I have to actually live with the bass that's in whatever I've got. And then the filter that we're using is on the very top of stuff. And then this is just the mixing EQ. Now, as for the actual sound itself, let's listen to what this sounds like without anything. That might sound awesome to you, and it does sound awesome to me now, but I briefly touched on this in the previous video about kind of how I go about my bass experiments. Every once in a while I'll open up a project and I will just kind of mess around. Usually it'll be me trying to start a song, but then like it doesn't really go anywhere, but I'll have made a sound, I'll have made basses, or I'll have tried to make something, I'll have something in my mind that I want to try and do, and then I'll try and do it, and I usually won't do it, because it's as sometimes, as easy as I make it look, it's actually super duper hard to ever get exactly the kind of thing that you're trying to recreate, even from your own mind or from someone else, unless you know exactly what they did. So usually my attempts fall short. Usually when I try to do something, it just kind of like, oh, that was close, but no, not really. And so for that particular purpose, it's a bit of a disappointment. My drag samples folder, the slice beats with all the drag samples that I have because I didn't name my stuff, is a gigantic mausoleum to failure most of the time. I mean, I still have a lot of drag samples I use with actual songs that end up being drag samples that I end up using because I like them. But generally speaking, they were never really what I wanted. The thing is, though, is that they weren't what I wanted for that one right then, what I didn't want. But when I made this song, I started out doing all the pretty stuff first. And then when I actually started got the drop, I'm like, I have to get a bass. I don't know what to do. I don't feel like making one. Like I wasn't in the space of mind to actually make one of these kinds of basses. So I went and grabbed one out of the drag samples folder that I thought sounded cool. And then I did all this stuff to it, the band passing and the filtering and whatever. Because this guy actually now sounds really dope. It sounds exactly what I wanted for this song. And if I were making it for this song, that would have been a success. But I wasn't making it for this song when I originally made it. So that's the kind of the mind game about making this sort of stuff. The problem with that is that I don't know how I made this sound. I know generally how I made this sound. I know that it involved the kind of EQ2 filter stuff that I usually do with stuff, which is like a bandpass and 2 notches, and then distortion, and then the compression, and then a bandpass and 2 notches, that kind of stuff. Stuff that I in the past may have referred to as EQ modulation, which is really not what it is. It's just filtering. It was also probably a citrus sound. It might have been a Harmer sound. It felt squelchy enough that it might have been a Harmer sound. But it might have even been a vocoder sound. Like, I don't know specifically if I made a Hada bass using this sound, but I did. All the stuff I'd used to make it are present in the Hada basses, which I know is sort of a dick move to say, just be like, go watch all the Hada basses, all 120 of them. But, I mean, you should do that anyway because it's full of a lot of useful information, but I know it's kind of a time investment. So I apologize that I wasn't able to get the source right. However, most of the primary modulation, most of the primary feel was accomplished by all the stuff that I have present here, like the reverb automation, the bandpass automation. You could put other stuff in there that kind of sounded similar and it will more or less apply. So there's that. That happens again over here. Nothing else really new happens. This is a thing that's like almost inaudible in the actual final mix. This is a granulized thing. It's one of the Leviathan risers that I put in a granulizer, and then I automate I think the grain spacing somewhere. Yeah, okay, so spacing, hold time, and attack time. So it basically just gets faster. So yeah, that's the end of the intro sound design, and we kind of already talked about the bass, but here's sort of an action where we have band passing, and we have the reverb kind of kicking in. So kind of listen for the reverb on the bass when this is happening, and kind of look at how that feels. That basically, like when I had decided to do that, this basically worked exactly like I wanted. It caused that kind of like wideness to happen right, and I had control over it because I'm automating the wet dry, and like this just was such a cool idea. It's rare that stuff works precisely the way I want it to, right? Like, you know, first try. So there's a couple other audio based sounds in here. Like this is like this guy. Number 24. That I can tell you was just a bandpass. It was some Reese bass sounding thing with some width and a bandpass. And that was probably like the first step of like a resampling process I was going to do into something. But that wasn't really much else other than that. You can tell because like when it gets to that like kind of crunchy high end. right there. That's what happens when you push like the bandpass to the higher frequencies, and then you're still processing those higher frequencies like lag layout through like the compression and distortion and all the stuff that's in the chain. That's what that sounds like. Notice that I played 2 different ones just there, and that's because I have multiple copies of a lot of these sounds that are different pitches, different kinds of time stretching variables, and that kind of stuff. And this is a lot of the same techniques that I used later in the R is Silent, because I hadn't made that track yet when I made this. What are you? That definitely sounds like something that got vocoded. It does. A lot of these sounds use this, I mean, because back in this particular time period when I was making this stuff, I was really into that particular process. I still am, obviously, but it was like the thing I was doing at the time. So like a lot of these extra sounds were just basically on that. That was, I can get a little more specific with that sound. That was a Citrus using the ring modulation kind of stuff. If that I do, look for any how to bass that says RM in the title. I probably use this process on it. Basically, what happens is I'm FMing an oscillator with a gigantic amount of noise that by itself would have sounded awful, and then I ring modulate the FM operator, because ring modulation is like FM, only it controls volume instead of pitch. And remember, you change the intensity of FM by modulating the volume. So if I'm using ring modulation on the FM oscillator, it means it's turning the FM on and off really fast on the output oscillator, which might have sounded really complicated, but go and find one of those how to basses if that was over your head. The result to this is that it creates an oscillation level sharpness that it makes really awesome carriers to things. And I don't think that was a vocoder I was using on that just then. When it gets kind of smoother sounding and like higher frequency. When it gets kind of like smeary in the higher frequencies, what that is the ring modulation coming off for a second. It's I automate the ring mod to kind of go on and off, and when it sounds like a kind of thing happening, that's the ring mod coming off. On top of all that, I'm probably doing my usual band passing, and it didn't sound like I was doing the notching business. I might have just been doing the band pass, but that's what the original sound was. So that should be enough of a thing. If I showed it to you, obviously it would have been better, but that description is pretty apt. And like I said, there's other how to basses that cover that kind of stuff. And I just chop it up a whole bunch of times. Like this kind of stuff. The reason why I'm always making really big phrases, like 4 bars of just bullshit. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm gonna make smaller cuts of the little tiny moments of it to do stuff like this. Like, I'm never just using the phrase. I'm never just making the phrase and then playing that whole phrase. I'm just chopping it up, and then that gets in the song. That's a lot of fun. This guy is one of the other basses, but granulized. 118. So it's the main bass. This is the main bass sample, and it's being granulized. And the settings that I chose here, like you can just look at it because these are all the settings that are in the granulizer. There's nothing behind them, no kind of secret settings. And I'm automating, I believe, the grain spacing. Yeah, grain spacing and the panning. The way the panning works in granulizing in the granulizer is that it switches left and right each individual grain. And given particular settings, like how fast the graining is happening, it can actually make a really nice stereo spread. And I'm automating the grain spacing. So at the end here, what's happening is that it's getting slower. The graining, it's getting slower. So you kind of hear it. And it starts to get like noticeably wider. It's a combination of that plus the fact that I'm also spreading it wider. So there's that. Also has been happening this whole time is this chord. Now, I actually had a lesson right before doing these videos with a student who wanted to know how to make not necessarily this sound, but similar sounds to this. And the thing about sounds like this is that while the sound design is important, the biggest important part about these things is the particular chord that you're choosing. In this case, this is an E minor 7. And it's also like a very wide stack. A couple octaves are being passed here, kind of thing. So we got bass and higher frequencies, and they're all combining to make the sound that we got. So the chord that you're using is just as important as the sound that you're creating when you're making these kinds of pad-ish sounds. As for this actual sound, I had the pluck on, and I know that I mess with it. Yep. So what the pluck does is that it's not just a literal filter shape. What it is that it controls the decay time for each individual harmonic, and this graph controls that time thing. This is saying this graph is set up to be on the x-axis. It's harmonic level, like the harmonic, and then y-axis is how long. So down here, this is where the first harmonic lives, the fundamental, and this is saying that like all of these guys have this amount of time to decay, and then these guys decay immediately, and you can see that happening. I have no idea why I did that, to be totally honest, but I honestly could have just as easily done this with a volume shaper, like a volume shape like envelope, but I decided to get fancy. And then I have harmonic use and pitch, which is causing weirdness. If you're not familiar with what this graph is doing, this graph is also harmonic versus unison pitch depth. So the unison is being controlled per harmonic. It's not a single voice thing. It's an individual harmonic thing. So when I say I have 9 voices unison, we can pick any one particular harmonic, and we can see that this particular harmonic has a pitch amount difference unison, however many number of voices different unison, and also the phase settings for each individual harmonic. And the phase is generally kept together, and the pitch, you can actually change how deep that is per harmonic. And that's what this graph does. And it does a lot of weird shit when you do that. And it's being distorted. And there's nothing else happening to the sound. This is just raw coming out of Harmor. Coming straight out of Harmor. And it's just... Some of the so it's going into the sidechain channel, so it's being some of the impacts are being crushed, but that's what's up with that. These guys down here, this is more of a mixing thing, but I just want to point out that these are reversed drums. Which I had never done before, and I haven't done since. It's not because I don't think it's cool, it's just because I just honestly doesn't occur to me. What else happens here? So nothing else here happens until we get to this point. It's important to note that during all the crazy bass business during the drop and the really pretty parts is that I had those sounds I made in the intro on top of stuff. Like, these are all contributing to like the overall sort of layer of stuff. So it's important to note. So over here we have the ARP, the piano, the lead, a lower version of the lead. This is the same channel. I'm just playing an octave lower. That's combining with its higher self. And then we have this guy. Honestly, right now, this thing is basically my most favorite sound design in the entire song. It really was extremely out of my experience and out of my my comfort zone in terms of how this was made. So I got a reverb and I got some EQ, but the majority of what's happening here is happening inside Armor. So let's talk about that. What is causing? It's probably just the reverb because I believe the reverb is pretty full. Yeah, so the way that Valhalla Room works is that if the mix is all the way up, we're hearing only the reverb. And if mix is kind of down, this is basically the split between the dry and the reverb. If we have it pretty close up there, we really don't hear a lot of like. So that did have a pretty huge impact on how the sound sounds. Because I was looking for like, where's the volume on? Where's the volume on it? Because it sounds like it has a lot of attack, and it doesn't. So what's happening here is that first it's very high pitched and it got some harmonizing. And where are the harmonizer? Harmonizer's after the filter, which is actually important. And I remember exclaiming this when I was looking at this again during the previous video. And this is because I have a filter. If I didn't have the harmonizer on, it just sound like that. Now the way that the harmonizer works is that instead of just playing copies of a note that you're playing higher up there, it plays copies of the harmonics. And the ways that it's not really, yeah. And so the way that it works is that the width determines how much of it it's going to copy up. The strength determines how hard it copies it up, and then the amount is overall how loud it is. The thing is, though, is that in the advanced tab under unit order, we can change where the harmonizer lives. The harmonizer usually is before the filters. And what matters now is that because the filter is changing what the harmonic content is. And so it's going to alter what the harmonizer does to stuff. At least it should. The crazy shifting and weirdness that's going on in here, I actually have no clue what any of that means. It's actually, if you look at the manual for Harmor, it'll tell you what it means. And like, I almost kind of get it when I read it, but it's not described to me in such a way that I actually understand what it's actually telling me it's doing. So for the most part, I just kind of do that until it sounds good. And you can also right click it and do randomizing on the matrix. So nice, neat stuff. I must be automating the harmonizer to turn off. Or something. I'm really not, because I'm looking at this, the pluck, obviously. Okay. That was a demonstration about how the harmonizer's presence is linked to the filter, because it's after the filter in the order phase. The filter, much like the lead, is doing the whole keyboard tracking thing, plus the filter coming down, so that's controlling how many harmonics are being present. The pluck is on. Nothing is changing inside. See, when you look at this, and if I make any kind of changes to anything, I am looking for this little arrow in here to show that we did something in there. And if we didn't do anything in there, then it wouldn't be in there. So that's why I'm like, I wonder if I did anything weird to come in here. No arrows, so no, I did not. That means that everything that I did occurred kind of on the face and using and inside the normal menus of things, and by using the default parameters. I have phase randomness on again to kind of give it a bit of space. I have Hertz unison mode, which is not the same as regular unison modes, and I've explained a bit what that means. But basically, what that's saying is that like regular unison modes take into account the difference in scaling between lower frequencies and higher frequencies when it comes to notes, which is to say that like an octave range in the low end, like it's actually pretty clear, because if you look at A440, an octave lower from A440 is A220. So that means that there's 220 hertz between A220 and A440. But then the next octave above A440 is A860, 880. There is A880, and that's 440 hertz between that same octave. So there are two octaves, which note-wise are the same, they're equal distance, but one of them has twice as many harmonics as the other. So this means that at higher frequencies, you have a huge, vast amount of frequencies, and then in the bottom, you have not as much. So this means that if I want in an additive universe where we're controlling each frequency individually, every harmonic individually, if we want to have clean like note difference, that's why everything is done by a ratio, which is to say that like it changes based on a multiplier, so that when it goes higher, it correctly moves the note to the right frequency position that's represented by the amount it's in. This works for unison as well, because unison is what it's doing is that it's changing it's pitching up a different voice ever so slightly, and you have two different kinds of unison. You have they have Hertz mode and they have the rest of the modes. The rest of the modes do it normal way, which is to say that if I'm moving up something 1 hertz in the bass, it moves up maybe 100 hertz in the higher range, so that it's the correct distribution of notes. Hertz mode doesn't do that. Hertz mode, if you move it up 1 hertz, it moves up 1 hertz and everything else. And this creates really quickly, if you push it kind of hard, it creates a seriously atonal mess. But if you do lower enough values, it does sound kind of cool. And that's why I'm using it here, because it's a very special mode. That's why it's under special. That Hertz versus the other mode, which it can be referred to as octave mode, is present in pretty much every kind of thing that hardware has. And it all does the same thing. It changes how it applies its distribution of whatever it's doing. Yeah, so that's that. The bell sound that we're kind of hearing is from the harmonizer. And the bell business usually is a result of atonal harmonics. Like the metallic sound is they're sounding enharmonic, not really quite harmonic. And I mean, they are harmonic because we're using the harmonizer, and that means that they are present in the harmonic series, but because they're so weird and the settings are weird, they're probably not the ones that we would have expected. And so that's why it sounds a little bit enharmonic. Usually I would use the prism to accomplish enharmonic metallic sounding shit, because its whole point is that it changes the pitch of harmonics, which are not going to be locked to any kind of harmonic series. So, but that's just how this one worked. And reverb, lots of reverb and EQ. Good stuff. The hertz spreading probably also helped. All right, here's a sub drop. It's in the master. My mixing in this song is hilarious. It's going to be great to look at this in the next video. Part 3, going to be mixing, mastering, of course. I don't think there's anything new in this song afterwards. It's all the same stuff. Yep. That's it. Awesome. So I hope that the basses weren't too teasy, and that you can try and figure out how to do that kind of stuff if you want to do that kind of stuff. And I hope that the information present in here was enough to get you there if you want to get there, or that it was at least interesting. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.